Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Exotic Gardening Live. My name is York Chris, and over the next half an hour or so, we're going to go over a few gardening questions that people have posed me this week regarding the weather, basically, because what a week it has been. We've had freezing temperature. It's been extremely cold. Now, this is the start of winter, and we've already seen temperatures across the country down to -10 and lower in some places. Quite unexpected to have it this cold, but not completely unexpected because we've had temperatures like this in the past. So it is, like I said, a cold start to winter, and I think a lot of people have been shocked by how cold it's been for how long. It's not been the nights that have been cold, it's been the daytime temperatures that are cold as well. So in this video, we're going to look at some of the questions people have posed over the last few days. And if you've got any other questions you want to ask, put them in the live chat box and I'll be able to answer those I can see on my screen. So, like I said, it's been really cold. In my garden, it's been down to about -5.4, which is cold enough. It's not cold enough to kill a lot of plants outright, but the worrying and the more concerning thing is the daytime temperatures being extremely cold as well. There's been several days where it's not been above zero, and the average temperature on several days were like sub-zero, -1, -2 for the 24-hour period. So although I've not had the extremes where a lot of people have, of down to -7, 8, 9, 10, or even lower, I have had no really warm daytime temperatures. So it's a concern for a lot of people. If you're new to exotic gardening and you've only had plants growing for a few years, had mild winters, then you might be worried that plants not make it. And depending where you live and what protection you've given plants, then that unfortunately might be the case because we've had some extreme temperatures. No, down in Kent, down in Cambridgeshire, down in Somerset area, and obviously Scotland, which is notoriously a cold place because it's further up north. Inland areas have been a lot colder than obviously the coast as well, and seen some really harsh temperatures down to -10, -11 in some locations. Coldest temperature was up in Scotland. I think it was -17, which is the coldest since February 2021. But across the country, especially in England, been much colder than previous years, colder than the beast from the east in some areas, and probably equivalent to the December of 2010 where we got the extremely cold weather, but then we got snow across the full country, whereas this cold event has been cold and it's been snowy in some areas, but we've not seen a blanket of snow everywhere. We got no snow here in my part of Yorkshire at all. But I know a lot of places have further down south and further up north got a lot of snow, and it's probably still lying there now covering plants. So, on with some questions. So, the first question I've got is relating to Cyathea. So, I'm just going to do a bit of multitasking now and have a look at the question we've got here. This question comes from Jason. Jason says he's got um, Acacia australis was growing in a pot. It was fine after the first couple of nights down to -3, but then looked very unhappy, playing very dried fronds and droopy emerging frond. It's been brought inside where it is now, and because it's an australis, it's believed to be hardier than Cooperi. And do you think it will recover basically? And if you look at the photo here, we can see the droopy frond in the center. And overall, though, it doesn't look very dead, doesn't look completely past its best. I think it will survive. I think the shock of getting a few -3s will fry all the fronds, and it will any newly emerging fronds will also die back as well. But providing it's not completely frozen solid, that root ball, then it should make a recovery. But it will need to be kept well watered. One mistake you can make with Cyatheas, especially over winter, is thinking you can keep it frost free, but it needs to be watered as well. So do not let it dry out. You can kill them just as easy by letting them dry out as you can from getting them in the cold, basically. So definitely keep it well watered, and hopefully it should come back if it's only at about -3 for short periods. If it was sub-zero for 24 hours in a pot, even though it's one of the hardier Cyathias, I would be concerned that it might die. I would really be careful about this and sort of hope, well, keep it inside over winter now, basically. Keep it well watered, and fingers crossed it should come back. So, my next question is about onset. So, this question is from James, and he's been storing his Morellii. Now it's absolutely covered in greenfly aphids. So you can see on the photo there that's been sent through, got absolutely tons and tons of greenfly aphids all over the sort of part of the onset. It's been dry starred here. You can see it's covered in all these greenfly. And how to get rid of these? Well, basically, dry storing does prevent this to some extent because you haven't got lots of leaves and you haven't got growth over winter, but you've still got some sort of fleshy material near the top that might be sort of appetizing to greenfly. You can get this. Like I said, if you're growing onset Morellii as a growing sort of as a house plant, conservatory or in the house, then they're more likely to get covered in these. So dry storing is a good way to avoid this, but as you can see in this case, it's still being covered in greenfly. So the only way to get rid of these is basically wiping them off is the quick and easy way. It's not the nicest thing to do, but if you go ahead, get a cloth or something and literally rub them all off, and they should not come back in any great numbers. Just keep vigilant, and hopefully if the growth slows down, because I'm assuming it's still growing slightly even though it's been dry stored, then hopefully it'll harden the surface of the remaining leaves stalks here, and hopefully the greenfly won't be tempted to come back, more tempted by something else, something growing as a houseplant somewhere else in the garden. Yeah, basically wipe them off and it should be fine. I mean, they will come back anyway. It doesn't look nice with all these greenfly, but they will push out new leaves, when the plant warms up in spring anyway, and the new leaves will be affected until it goes back out in the garden, where it will start growing faster than the green flies can do any damage as such. Basically, at this stage, I would just wipe off all the green fly with a cloth. You can spray it, but basically spraying it, they're still going to be there, so you still need to wipe them off to get rid of them anyway. Right, so next question is about Musa Baju. So let's just get up the question here. So, and the question from Richard. So it's his first year growing Musa Baju bananas, and it's not being protected. As you can see in the photograph, you got a Musa Baju, it's had the frost, it's had the cold on it, and the leaves are blackened off, and everything's gone black basically because it's been damaged by the cold and it's not been protected. So the likelihood, I don't know what temperatures Richard had in his garden, but the likelihood at a size of a Musa Baju like this, and from the temperatures most people had, below the -5 widely across the country, chances are this will go to mush and you have to restart from the rootstock next spring. So you've probably lost all the height of this banana. So it's probably too late to protect it. What you can do is you can sort of wait until tomorrow, because what's going to happen tomorrow is we're going to have the big warm up across the country, and it's sort of starting tonight, to be honest. So it's still been freezing all day today on Sunday, but throughout the night it's going to get steadily warmer and warmer, and then by Monday afternoon we should see temperatures across the country in double digits. We might hit 15 degrees, which is like a 15-degree swing from where we have been from 0 to 15 in less than 24 hours, which is quite incredible, but not unheard of. So we're going to see all sort of all these bananas that have not been protected, we're going to see one of two things. We're going to see either they are going to be fine and they're not going to fall over, or what will happen is they will fall over because the only thing that's been holding them up for the last few days is all the solid ice inside the pseudostems. So tomorrow is a day where we might see loads of musabajus collapse all over the country, protected or not, depending how well the protection is and depending on how cold it's been in your location. So in the case of this one, I'm pretty certain if you've got lower than -5 and you've been cold for many days like it has been here, then it's pretty much certain it's going to collapse. You might find the bottom sort of 5, 10, 15 centimeters is firm, so you might want to cut it off at about 10, 15 centimeters above ground level, and then you can mulch the base. So you can put straw all over, or compost, or anything like that, any material to insulate the ground and insulate the bottom of the stem, the pseudostem of the banana. And then you might save, like I said, 5, 10, 15 centimeters of height. You've got a little bit of a start for next year's growth. I wouldn't protect anything right now, this minute, because obviously it's dark outside, but also the ground's still frozen. You don't want to insulate the ground and keep the cold in the ground around the plants. You want to wait for the ground to defrost more. Wait for tomorrow afternoon when it's going to get really, really warm. It won't get rid of all heavy, snow and ice if you've got absolutely loads in your location, but it should blitz and melt away any sort of ice in the foliage of plants. So in things like agaves, which will be full of ice, things like the Musabaju pseudostem, they should defrost pretty well tomorrow. And then you can sort of insulate what's left of any firm material that hasn't flopped over, basically. So let's see if we've got any questions in the chat. I've not put the chat on the screens, but it is on the live chat on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, see the live chat, you'll be able to see other people commenting. And I'll say good evening to people that have already commented on there. So good evening, Great Northern Exotic Garden. Thanks for tuning in. And also to Michelle Lilly. And we've got Uppy Raptor 49 as well. So, like I said, it's been a cold week, hasn't it? And I think hopefully we're not going to see weather like that, but we don't know for the rest of winter because being a very cold period early on in the winter, and we've still got the coldest months of the year ahead. We've still got January and we've got February, and they are on average much colder than December. Fingers crossed, December this year will be the coldest month. We don't want, plants to be subjected to more cold after cold after cold. So, you know, we talk about protecting plants, do all these videos about protecting plants, and sometimes it's not needed. You can get a winter which is really mild. Like last winter for most of us was a very mild winter. The lowest temperature I got was -4. But the important thing, daytime temperatures, we didn't get ice days. We got rebounds of up to, into +5, 6, 7 degrees in the daytime. So it meant any real cold nights, the frost and the ice melted in the daytime. The plants weren't subjected to days and days of being icy and frosty day and night. So it was really mild last year, and the last few years have been mild. We've had no proper good old-fashioned British winters for many years across most of the country. Yes, in 2018 we got the Beast from the East, which was big snowfall event. Loads of snow came down really quickly, and we did have some ice days. But that happened in, I think it was March, wasn't it? So it was right at the end of winter. So plants had, they'd got the awful dumping of snow in that event, but then it was spring. It was April then afterwards, so it didn't take long for plants to then be able to grow. Whereas this event now in December, where we've had a week of sub-zero temperatures for most of us across the country, it means that plants have suffered in December and still got to get through a couple more months at least before we can say safely into March and we shouldn't get cold weather again of any sort of detriment to plants. So we've got a long way to go. So if you protect the plants like Musabaju with straw or the other ways we've talked about with fleece and things like that, keep that protection on now. Don't unwrap it because it's really warm tomorrow. Keep that on all the way through the season, all the way through winter season, all the way through to March, and then remove it then when the chance of a big frosty period probably unlikely. And other plants, obviously, greenhouses. We talk about trying not to heat greenhouses this winter because of the cost of energy being so high. Um, Definitely something that I've been mindful of this winter. So I have reduced the thermostat in my greenhouse. I used to like to keep it sort of between 8 to 12 degrees, depending on how cold it was outside. But this winter, I've put it down to 3 or 4 degrees, basically keeping it frost free. But what that's meant is I've had to bring in any plants that want warmer temperatures into the house. So I've got more plants on windowsills and things like that. Or I've put them in my propagator or my hydropod, which keeps the roots and the soil nice and warm. And the foliage will just have to deal with 3 or 4 degrees, which is fine, to be honest, as long as the roots are warm and the foliage doesn't get to frosty temperatures. Even tender plants can get away with cooler air temperatures as long as the roots are warm enough. That's one of compromise I've made this winter just to bring down the costs of heating a greenhouse. Few more people joining the chat. Hello, Mike Cothran from Seattle, snowy Seattle. I'm guessing the weather in Seattle is pretty cold. I know Americans talk in Fahrenheit and most of us Europeans talk in Celsius, centigrade, so it's a bit of a conversion thing you have to do. But I know zero here is 32 Fahrenheit, isn't it? So I'm assuming it's pretty cold in America right now in many parts. I saw some comments earlier on in another place where even parts of Florida have seen it down to freezing, which is not something I would expect. You always think of Florida as being a pretty warm subtropical place, but the kind of frosty areas in winter as well. Hello to Mike. So I've got a question coming here from JH. Hello, JH. And the question is, how hardy are bamboos in containers? Mine are frozen solid and also Chemaerops humilis and olive trees. So 3 different plants there. Bamboos are hardy in the ground. Well, 99% of the ones we get in the UK are hardy in the ground. There's a few sort of tropical ones that some people do grow that are sort of tender, but basically all the ones we grow are hardy in the ground down to at least -10. Some are down to -20, 25. So temperatures we're never really going to see for most of the UK. And if they're in the ground, it's fine. They'll get through those temperatures, no problem. In containers, it's a little bit of a different story because in containers, the whole soil, the whole compost can freeze through. When it freezes through, water can't go into the roots easily and be uptaken by the plant. And basically, what's happening is you're getting frost, you're getting ice on the plant in the soil, and you're not allowed water to go up and feed it to water it basically, and it's drying out, and it's like you've not watered it for a full week. So when it's been frozen, what can happen is you're not getting the uptake of water into the plant, and it can desiccate, dry out. It can die from not having enough water, even though there is water there, but it's frozen. It has to be liquid, obviously, for the plant to use it. So you have to be careful. If it's a long time frozen, then you can kill a hardy plant in a pot, and this can go for any other sort of plant in a pot. If it's frozen through, it's like saying there's no water in the pot, and it can't then uptake it and drink that water basically. Chemaerops humilis is very drought tolerant. It can go a long time without any water really. So even if it's frozen solid for like 2 weeks or so, it will still be fine when it defrosts, providing it didn't go much below -10. Olive trees, again, they can cope with drought for many weeks at a time, so that should be fine. But again, there's a limit to how much cold it can take as well. Your bamboos are the ones that need the most moisture. It likes lots of water in the growing season, and even in the non-growing season, it still needs to be kept quite moist. So if you've had a bamboo in a pot and it's been frozen solid for like a week, I would be getting a bit concerned. I would hope, tomorrow it will defrost quite a lot because it's going to warm up a lot, and hopefully there'll be enough moisture ice melt in the pot to give it moisture and help it on its way. But yeah, bamboos in pots, when they've been frozen, can be a bit iffy and might not come back well. So you just have to see what happens to the foliage over the next week or two. That's something else I wanted to talk about is the fact that although it's going to be mild tomorrow and it's going to be milder, it's not going to be really cold for the next week or so. You might go around your garden and look at your plants and think they're okay or they're definitely not okay. But you don't really know the effects of this past week if plants are going to make it or not, or be damaged in some way, really, until the growing season starts for a lot of plants. So, for palm trees, which many of us grow, obviously, if you go outside tomorrow and you look at your palm tree and it's all gone brown and black and the center's rotten and falling out, then that is obviously not a good sign. That shouldn't be the case for most straight away. Maybe Washingtonia robusta. If you're growing that inland areas, if it's seen -10, then it will be looking very bad even early on. But things like bootias, which are hardier than that, that will be borderline in some places for this winter because they're sort of somewhere between -7, -12, somewhere in that area will outright kill them if it's cold enough for long enough. So we'll have to see. They might look green for a long time, but they might just slowly die. The growth point might be dead inside because they've frozen for too long inside. You might not see the death of the palm until spring when growth should start. You might just see the palm quickly go brown and die then. So that's probably not the nicest thing you want to hear if you've got some green looking palms and thinking they'll be fine, because they could still die in spring. They could be basically in suspended animation while it's cold over winter, and then when the growth season starts, they'll either grow or they'll die, or they might do somewhere in between, which will happen to a lot of palms. I'm expecting some of my palms might do this other thing, which is where you see spear pull. So that is where the older leaves are fine, they're staying green, they'll be fine photosynthesizing, the palm's alive, but the center, the newly emerging leaves and fronds out of the center, they might basically rot off. They might push out half a green leaf looking quite good, and then the rot is further down where it froze in winter. Then the whole center will just basically come away in your hand with a little tug, and that's why we call it spear pull. So that might happen. And if it's bad enough spear pull and the whole growth point's gone, then the palm has no way to regenerate and it will eventually die. Or it might not be too bad and underneath there's still enough growth material to push out new leaves and it will carry on as normal, but be set back a few months because obviously it's not got lots of big leaves emerging early in spring. It'll have to wait till summer before those leaves come out. I've been corrected on the Beast from the East in 2018. It did end in March, but it started in February, which is still a lot better in terms of where it happened in winter compared to this event we've just had. If you've got any other questions, so roll back up. What are my gardening plans for January? Are you planning any new beds in the garden and buying seeds? Yes, I'll definitely be buying seeds, and I think Christmas period is a really good time to actually go through the seed catalogs, search online for anything you think you might want to grow, get inspiration from the seed catalogs, and do your seed ordering early, basically. I'll be doing mine over the Christmas period. I'll be buying my ricin seeds and my sort of summer bedding seeds, and we'll see what else appeals to me when I'm looking through those seed catalogs. In terms of the garden itself, there's lots of plans I want to do for the garden, but it's time and it's seems to go very quickly now between days off and things. Obviously, shooting videos, my YouTube channel, everything else that happens. I don't have enough time to do big major projects at the moment, but I do want to sort of change some of the paths in the garden. And I think January, I'll be clearing all the mess basically. So all the material, things like my miscanthus grasses that are standing tall now, they're 2-3 meters tall. All that material I need to cut down and get rid of. I need to trim back some hedges. I need to get rid of all the canna and dahlia foliage all across the garden that obviously is very black now because that got killed off by the frost. But underneath the ground, the rhizomes will be totally fine. So yeah, there's tidying up jobs to do in January and tidying up jobs to do in February. And then as soon as we get towards the end of February, it'll be time to start sowing seeds, and that's what I'll be doing then. So there's never a quiet time in the garden if you're an exotic gardener because you're planning ahead, or you're protecting plants, or you're enjoying the plants in the summer. This time of year, obviously, it's all about protecting plants, watching the weather forecasts, and then tidying up the mess that the weather's made, tidying up, and also getting seeds ready as well. Um, any more questions or comments? Let's have a look. Question from Tiki Tropicals. Hi there. With lots of people potentially losing plants, plus the price of energy, do you think there'll be a change in the way lots of tropical style gardens are planted? Good question, and I think yes. I think I just did a video actually yesterday that sort of commented on the fact that having a cold spell is might be a good thing for a lot of gardeners because that people will realize, because we've not had a cold winter for many years really, will realize that yes, your garden might be affected by cold, and plants that you think are sort of hardy-ish that you can get away with now that were thought of as, half hardy or tender in the past, they're still half hardy and tender because, we've had mild winters where they've not been affected by cold. Now we've got cold and it's either damaged it or potentially killed it, and people will be thinking, I should protect those plants better in the future, or they'll be thinking, I will grow hardier plants in the future. So I think people will move to grow hardier plants, and hopefully people will go and actually protect plants as well so that they can still grow sort of the tender, well, half hardy plants in the gardens that we like to enjoy and enjoy them in future years rather than just say no, completely giving up on those sorts of plants. So I think it will affect a lot of people to, like I said, protect plants better and maybe move to more hardy plants because we don't want to lose money all the time. We don't want to be just buying plants and seeing them killed every other winter. We want to get them through, have a nice garden all year round, ideally, definitely through the summer months and autumn months, and then not spend too much money either bringing them in and heating them in a greenhouse or in the garden and letting them die and then having to buy new plants the next year. We want to protect the plants that are on the borderline or grow hardier plants. So yes, we will see that, I think. The places that grow these tender plants, the nurseries, they will have to look at how much they charge because the heating costs have gone up. They've got to heat their glass houses over winter to keep these tender plants going so that it looks so that we can buy them come spring and summer next year. I think the prices probably go up and the range will probably reduce because they haven't got that capacity to heat so many different tender plants if we get cold winters again, basically. Question from Misui Yogi is how are the Jabayas doing? As mentioned earlier, won't know completely if they're totally fine until spring when the growth should start. But I imagine my big Jabaya in the back garden will be totally fine. I didn't protect it at all because it's hardy at least to -10, and we've only seen -5 here. Yes, I'm concerned that we had 3 full days sub-zero, but because the mass of that plant, it's a great big, thick trunk on it, big thick leaves, and pretty hopeful that it didn't freeze through right to the center. That'll be fine come spring. Smaller one that I do have another Jabea in the front garden, and the front garden has benefited from just being warmer. They've got more breeze going through the front garden because it's more open. It is east southeast, well, east southeast facing, so it gets the early morning sun when that does come out, and it's not too far away from the warmer road and the houses and my front area of the garden as well. And it's just a bit warmer, the climate there. So the frost melted there much earlier than it did in the back garden. So I'm pretty hopeful that one will be fine and it won't have seen -5.4 like the back garden did. It'll have been a little bit milder. I'm pretty hopeful for those. The other plants in the garden, so my Brighton Marta, I'm expecting will probably spear pull because that's what it does at a small size when it's been sub-zero for several days and it's down to -5, -6. You do get spear pull, but no damage to the leaves. My Trachycarpus will all be fine, apart from the tender ones. So we've got Latisectus and Martianus have shown damage to the leaves already, which to be expected. They are pretty fast growing in terms of producing leaves. So I think next spring they'll be fine as long as we don't carry on with cold weeks in January and February. And so I don't think we'll see too many losses. The agaves undercover should be fine. We'll see how the Americana variegated does, because that is definitely borderline. So that might be mushy. I've not checked on that one yet, so I'll have to see. Got a question from James Lee. How will gingers fare out this year? We've had -8 in the west of Ireland and word that'll be kaput. Gingers are pretty tough, I've found. In fact, I found most gingers are hardier than most canners overall. I think obviously the foliage on all canners and dahlias and gingers will be completely zapped by the temperatures we've had. And if you've had -8, then obviously all the foliage is gone. Providing you mulch the ground before the frost came, then hopefully underneath where the rhizomes are, it'll be totally fine, and you won't have lost them. If you didn't mulch at all, and obviously rhizomes are very close to the surface, it might be touch and go with -8, depending how long it was at that temperature and what other temperatures you've had, if the gingers die or not. But fingers crossed they should be okay. Depends which types you've got as well. One more question, I think, and then I think we'll call it a night. Oh, I should say, I've got a few. What should I say is congratulations. Yeah. Oh, we answered last question. So obviously, I'm a exotic gardening YouTuber. There's others out there as well, including George's Jungle Garden. I want to say congratulations to him and his wife for the arrival of their new daughter. Congratulations, George. If you're watching. And also, what have we had to happen today? There's a World Cup today, didn't we? So congratulations to Argentina for winning that. I don't know if anybody from Argentina watches my channel, but if you do, well done to your country for winning the World Cup. So any more questions? Have a look. Yeah. So the main question I have had on Instagram as well as on YouTube this week was about obviously the weather and about protection of plants. And I don't want people to give up hope in terms of thinking everything's going to die, because it's not the case. Obviously, if you grow hardy backbone plants like your either bamboos or your Trachycarpus, phormiums, your cordylines, things like that should be fine for most of us. Although I've seen reports that cordylines in some people's gardens have already flopped over because they've had lower than -10, which is about the limit for the green cordyline australis. On the whole, most of us haven't seen -10. I know it's been variable across the country and actually over quite short distances this week. We've had some areas we've had -2, and a mile down the road it's been -6, 7, 8. So there's been quite a lot of variation. So hopefully, with good protection of your garden, good microclimate, and good choice of plants, not trying to grow super tender stuff, then most of your plants should get through. I'm sort of not protecting everything this year too much. I'm trying to do minimal protection. Obviously, got my greenhouse where I've kept my tender-ish things, so my Aeoniums are in there, smaller agaves are in there, and my onset dry stored Haniba bananas are in there as well. In the garden, obviously, the things that are protected are the center of some of my tender palms, so the Martianus, the Latisectus, and also, what else did I protect? My Scheffler macrophylla obviously is classed as half hardy to tender in some people's eyes. I found it's coped down to -7 with snowfall on top. I did put a fleece over the top of that, and hopefully that's enough to see that through. And I did tie up the Canary Island date palm. So Canary Island date palms will die at -10, definitely. They will die at -5, 6, 7, 8 if it's cold enough for long enough as well, and especially if it's in a pot. Mine's planted in the front garden, which I said is a bit warmer, warms up quicker in the early morning sun than in the back garden. And all I did was just tie up the fronds, tie up the leaves. 4 days, I've untied them now so they can benefit from a bit of rain on them and also from the warm temperatures that will be coming tomorrow. I can't see any damage whatsoever on the Canary Island date palm, but like I said earlier, it could be come spring the centre might ross out and then it'll be dead and we have to dig it up, but we won't know until spring, so we have to watch this space. So hopefully people will have enjoyed this live stream and I've answered as many questions as I can that have come through. If you have any other questions, feel free to put in the comments after this video finishes, so not in the live stream but in the comment section underneath, and I'll reply to those, or I will add them and do another live stream and we'll add and answer more questions. I've updated my setup a little bit here, so you can see I've got a green screen behind me. Hopefully the sound's quite good because I've got a better microphone now and lights as well, so you can see everything a bit clearer. Thank you for watching. Join me next time on Exotic Gardening Live.